Welcome back to Road to Cana. We're here again with Father Edward Connolly, who's a parish priest in the Diocese of Allentown. Welcome back, Father.
Thank you, Mr. Buono.
Today we're going to talk about the subject of capacity for marriage. The Church puts great importance, or I should say stresses the importance of the capacity for marriage. And we're going to explore what that term means and what's expected as a result. Father, I'd like to start with the expectation of the Church when it comes to marriage. What does the Church expect when two couples come together to give their free will consent in marriage?
When any person consents to do something, the presupposition is that he or she is able to do what he or she consents to do. So, for example, if I were to say to you, Mr. Buono, that I think you're a splendid young man, and I would like to give you $100,000, okay, you would probably say to me, "Oh, thank you." And time would pass, and you would say to me, "Father Connolly, when are you going to give me that $100,000? I don't mean to be impolite, but," and I would say to you, "Oh, I don't have $100,000. I don't have anywhere near that amount of money." Then that's an indication that, I consented to something or promised something, but I just don't have the means. And so people who do that very often are sort of relegated to the community of the absurd. They're not to be taken seriously if they promise what they just cannot do. So when two people are contracting marriage, the presupposition of the Church is that they can give what is required, that they have the capacity, that they have the wherewithal to give what is necessary. Now, what are the things that they give? I guess it could be brought down into three matters. This is the sacred tripod of marriage: fidelity, permanence, and openness to the begetting of children, the conceiving of children, the raising of children. Now, that third one always has a little proviso: God willing, of course. Right. There sometimes happens that people cannot due to circumstances beyond their control. But fidelity and permanence, are you capable of giving that? And if you're just not capable of it, well, then you just cannot enter into a valid marriage.
Yeah. Okay. So marriage itself, that kind of implies that marriage in and of itself is not somebody's right to enter into. Well, I should say it's kind of its own. It stands alone. Marriage is what it is. It has its expectations. It has its needs, and it has. It is what it's expected to be. I mean, you're supposed to be something, and inside of it, and the individuals, in a sense, are not the most important element of marriage. And I mean, even though we have a fundamental natural right to marriage, we still have to respect marriage in and of itself for what it is, right? We cannot just be light about it. And in this case, we don't have a right to marriage in the sense of we have a right to do whatever we want to do in marriage or make it up as we go.
Correct. Marriage pre-existed you and me and everyone else on the planet. Marriage is fundamentally something that started between the first human beings, Adam and Eve. And we say that the particular man and particular woman who are entering into this contract, they don't have the right to define the terms of what marriage means. They are entering into something that pre-exists them. And so they have to have the capacity to fulfill what is already laid down.
Since it starts with Adam and Eve, did Adam and Eve have a capacity for the marriage that they entered into, or I assume that we don't see anywhere where they divorced, obviously, but as far as fulfilling their roles, do we know that they had a capacity in the sense of what it means?
Well, that's a corollary of the fact that they were created, in the image of God, and that at the time of their marriage they were without sin, and so there was no corruption in their nature whatsoever.
Right.
They were certainly capable of marriage. And it's interesting that you mention that, because Adam was relieved, and Eve was also relieved of the necessity to discern whether he should marry this woman, she should marry this man. There they were. But we laugh at that. We say, "Oh, how about that?" Yeah, they didn't really have a choice. And sometimes people put so much emphasis on choice that they miss the point. Sometimes people think that capacity for choosing makes them human, but I don't think that's true. I think capacity for choosing sometimes clouds the issue. Theologians will say that God does not ever need to choose. God doesn't choose. Why would God choose? Because that would indicate that there's some element of doubt or uncertainty in God. There's no uncertainty in God. God simply does. He acts. He does not pause and consider this option or that option. He simply does. What is correct and good is always obvious to him.
Yes.
Did I get lost there, or maybe I lost you then?
Well, we were talking about Adam and Eve, and then they certainly didn't have the choices that men and women have today, right, in making a decision for marriage, right? But we were leading to how that doesn't define who we are as our capacity to make the choice, individual. So what is important in capacity, do you think? I mean, what is the term? I mean, is it basically capable? Is that what it means? I mean, capacity.
Capacity, I don't know that I could break it down much more than it is already obvious. The capacity, a room has a certain capacity for how many occupants. Sometimes you see these signs in a public hall, capacity, by order of the fire marshal or something like that. This room is only able to hold so many people. A certain car, you can't get too many people in the car. You get 4 people, 6 people, 8 perhaps, but probably not more than that. So everything has its capacity. And so it's the same with human beings. We either have the capacity or we don't have the capacity. It means the ability to carry out what we pledge.
Right. And now going back to what the church expects, we look at fidelity and permanence and openness to children. So just starting with fidelity, this is a huge one. We have all kinds of implications today about fidelity. Do you think that people go into marriage with some kind of remnant of thought, even if it's in the back of their mind, that this could end, that love might die off, and that they have some kind of an out? Do they really forsake all others and decide on staying with one person the rest of their life?
Well, it's dangerous, of course, to make general statements about people, but I suspect that there are some people who enter into marriages having in the back of their minds, if he or she does not please me at some point during this marriage, and I feel the need to have an extracurricular affair with somebody else, I certainly reserve that right to myself. And anyone who thinks that way obviously is not, entering into a true marriage. That would be an impediment right away. Now, who knows what evil lurks in the minds of men? Only the shadow knows, But the very decision. In fact, there's the highest court that exists in the Catholic Church is the Sacred Roman Rota, and which makes decisions about marriage cases, and which is able to, overrule local dioceses or affirm local dioceses in their decisions. And the Sacred Roman Rota said, I'm not quoting them now, but I'm trying to give the gist of it, that if a person entered into marriage saying to himself, herself, that I don't intend to be unfaithful to my future spouse, but I theoretically reserve to myself the right to do so if I find that it is necessary or convenient or compelling to do so. The sacred Roman Rota would say, oh, that marriage was invalid from the start, so it wasn't really a marriage.
Right, right. So fidelity, being with one person the rest of your life, and the permanence that it will be for the rest of your life. Those are huge, and we're talking about being in a state of attitude, or what would some other adjectives be? But an attitude that they go into the marriage with that in mind. That's what's important for making the consent when it comes to capacity, isn't it?
Right. No doubt there are some people who give the consent, but in my little silly example at the beginning about consenting to give you $100,000 but not having $100,000, I think we have to say, in deference to the sincerity of the great majority of human beings, most human beings are not deliberately deceptive. Most human beings are good. Most human beings are decent. Most human beings are not out to get you, okay? Right. Most human beings want to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean that just because they want to do the right thing that they are capable of it, because everybody is damaged in some way. And I think there are some people who are just not capable of fidelity. There was a word that I remember way back in the seminary that we learned, and the word was hyperesthesia. And what it means is an overwhelming need or desire for pleasure, okay? Hyper above aesthesia, that which is pleasant or pleasurable. And we were told that in the male, they used the rather humorous Latin phrase, Don Juanismus, Don Juanism, and then in the woman they would refer to this as nymphomania. Now, I remember being in my 20s when I would see that in the textbook and hear the professor lecturing, and I sort of snickered as all the rest of us 20-something guys and 30-something guys snickered, oh, that's funny. Until years later, I ran into a case where I would say, my goodness, Don Juanismus. I remember a young man who was unfaithful to his wife, who was a very beautiful woman, I thought, and she was very sad about it, of course. And she told me that he had been unfaithful several times. And she left him, as well she might. But then he contacted her and wanted to get back, with her. She asked my advice. I said, well, you are husband and wife, so it seems, so if he is repentant, we're all in favor of forgiveness, so accept him back. And I remember seeing the two of them, and I remember the young man, without any prompting from me, getting down on his knees and apologizing to his wife for his unfaithfulness. And I was touched because I thought to myself, gee, that's beautiful. I'm witness here to the prodigal son come home. And, I thought, well, it's a good day's work. Good day's work. Yeah. Farewell, my children, and grow and prosper, Within 2 weeks, he hadn't been unfaithful again. Oh, and she came back, and I said to her, gee whiz, I said, I think something I read in a textbook a long time ago, has just unraveled before our very eyes, Yeah. I said, I think the young man you married, he's not insincere, I don't think. Only God can judge that. I think he just doesn't have the capacity for faithfulness. Now, is it his fault that he doesn't have the capacity for faithfulness? Well, nobody ever gave me a license to assign culpability or fault. We can just judge the objective situation. Right. And the fact is there are some people who just, for some reason, don't have the capacity to be faithful. Right. And that's that. Right. And if that is not uncovered before the two people get married, somewhere along the line it will be uncovered. And that's what keeps marriage tribunals sometimes occupied. Not only that, but that's one instance.
Very true.
So watch out for Don Juanismos.
Let's take a moment now and turn to our experts on the subject of capacity for marriage.
Capacity, in the sense of capability, readiness. Capacity also suggests, doesn't it, that you talk about a box or something, you say it has a capacity to contain so much, which means that you have a readiness to receive from the other. You know, the opposite is to be so filled with yourself that there's no room, there's no capacity for anyone else in your life. And of course, in marriage, there is a radical decision, a breathtakingly radical decision that is expressed in the theology of the body, as John Paul the Great explicated it, of the mutual gift of self. And the mutual gift of self is not only the readiness to give, but the readiness to receive, the readiness to take very, very seriously this biblical understanding right from the beginning in the book of Genesis, that the two become one flesh.
The first thing a man's got to know is whether he is able to surrender the I for the we. If he can't do that, tell him forget it. When you can surrender your ego for the good of your wife and your kids, then come back and we'll talk about it. But until that happens, there's really no sense in this. Becomes an academic discussion, and this is really not for academics.
I think in our society and culture, a lot of people, well, that's, you know, hopefully most diocesan programs, you take a test, or you have these various versions of pre-Cana, which the road to Cana and some of the things you're involved in is a great help for diocese and for other individuals interested. But there are people who are incapacitated because of severe psychological or psychiatric problems, and or coming from, we have to be careful here. You know, there's an enormous number of split families, and a person who grows up in a family without a father or mother, could they be a great parent? Absolutely. Could they form a great marriage? No question. But as the expression is today, issues. They may have issues that, and those issues have to be looked at and dealt with before marriage, and just don't assume, because oftentimes what's really inside of a person, it can be repressed, and it's only then all of a sudden they're 35 or 40, and then those hurts, those problems, those come boiling up, you know, like oil or something, boiling up to the surface. And yeah, so I think that in our society, culture produces lots of people. I don't want to say they can't get married. I would say they have a much lesser capacity to make the gift of self to the other person and have it reciprocated.
First of all, if you're thinking about getting married, okay, don't go into don't start to live together. Bad idea, because it's easy to fall to fall in love with sex, but you have to fall in love with the person, and you're just not going to make proper decisions when about whether you love the person when you're having relations with them. It doesn't work.
If a person was very promiscuous before marriage, they should go through a time of real repentance. And this means even if they were promiscuous with the person that they are marrying. And I wouldn't be particularly sure of the lasting quality of the marriage unless there is a real time of repentance which could be mutually shared. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but I think there should be a sense of regret that the divine law was not followed, and they will want to follow it themselves, and they will want their children to follow it.
Within our parishes and the life of the church, we have to lift up to celebrate more fully and to set up for emulation and inspiration the example of people who have lived that grand adventure of sacramental marriage and have discovered the gift of fidelity fulfilled.
As far as overall, in terms of Catholics at very different levels, or Christians at very different levels, or whatever, I would say the further you are from a deep commitment to the Lord, the further you are from being able to be comfortable making a commitment. I think the two go together. I don't think, if people that are really committed to the Lord are going to be shy about committing to a person once they've gotten to know them and once they've prayed about it and felt confident that this is the right choice.
What is the objective truth? Now, Catholics are lucky when it comes to morality. We know what is objectively right because of the magisterium and the teachings of the Church. So we have a lot of advantages over other Christians and people that are not Christians. We know. If we're interested, we can find out what is objectively right and what is objectively wrong. What we have to find out, though, and the people that we're interested in to making a lifelong commitment, do these people subscribe to the same objective moral norms as we do? And if we don't, if we're Catholics and we don't believe in objective norms, or if we believe in some and not all, then before we walk down the aisle with somebody, another Catholic, we should examine our own conscience and find out, hey, is there something the matter with me? Maybe I should go back and relearn my religion and find out that, hey, there is an objective right and wrong, and it is being taught. And even if we don't like it, that's the religion we were brought up in, that's the one true faith, and that's the faith that we have to adhere to as best we can.
You undertake this with the Lord, and you undertake it in response to what you discern to be the Lord's will for you, and the Lord will see you through. I mean, it becomes, there's a sense in which marriage, as with any other project of great consequence that is good and right and true, is God's project before it's our project.
If you're not committed to God, well then everything's kind of up for grabs, and you need to, you feel a little bit Pelagian. In other words, you feel that I have to figure this all out myself, and I have to discover everything about this person. And if it's not just the way I want it, well then I don't have to commit here. And so it makes it very difficult, I think, to make a commitment to a person if you haven't got this commitment to God and you don't have this trust that God is guiding you, and you don't have the prudence to do your part so that God can guide you.
I have 5 or 6 different Catholic psychiatrists or psychologists or counselors that I trust. And oftentimes I recommend to a couple that's going to get married that they have 1 session or 2 sessions. It doesn't mean they have deep problems or they're psychologically ill or they have psychiatric problems, although they may or may not, but normally it doesn't. But it means just to talk out compatibility, who are we? And particularly in this culture, this civilization we're in, there's all types of things that are really induce, you could call it neuroses, I don't want to use these technical terms, or unhealthy things in the culture that infect us, and we have to make sure that we at least recognize them if we can't get rid of them. So I think there's nothing, a good pre-Cana program, a healthy one, or these type of programs hopefully will help the spouses ask those questions. But if you can find a good Catholic health professional that you use, the same way you get a physical exam hopefully before marriage, you should have probably a psychological exam, so to speak. So that doesn't mean right or wrong or bad or good. It means this is the way we more or less test, and we want to go into marriage understanding that.
A lot of times men, and I don't profess to know too much about dating, I am engaged, but from my experience, I was looking in the woman to fill whatever was lacking in me, that void that I had in my life. And I never found fulfillment. I never found peace. I never found that the relationship ever worked out. Because really, I need to be looking to Christ to fill that first. And then I can then begin to work with her and love her and serve her. But those relationships never worked because we were both looking from each other to give what only Christ can give.
It's very important that the marriage is sustained. Sometimes people think, well, the marriage is sustained by the love and the affection and the attraction and the mutual satisfaction that two people have. Well, yes, but there's another sense in which the love is more sustained by the marriage than the marriage is sustained by the love.
I think it's really important for marriage preparation to be about the sacrament, about what it means that a man and woman are coming together in the Lord, that they are cementing that commitment, not just with any words. That's why in the church we don't have people write their own vows, because those words mean something very specific. And so it's not just any kind of contract or partnership that you might enter into with somebody. This is a profound reality that you're entering into when you decide to marry.
There's a good point that Father Neuhaus brought up, that capacity also implies the capability of receiving, which I thought was interesting. What do you think about that as far as, I guess, the ability to receive love, right? That the ability to receive the gift that the other's trying to bestow on you?
Oh, yes, sometimes we hear about women, perhaps more likely women than men, but maybe not just women, who have had very bad experiences in childhood or early adult years, teenage years perhaps, of sex being used as an instrument to hurt them. Okay, put it bluntly, perhaps they were molested, and that is going to really psychologically impair the woman as far as her capacity to receive her husband's love, because marriage love, as we mentioned once before, marriage love is not simply spiritual love. It's human love, and being human love is the spiritual transmitted through the physical.
Right.
Again, something I learned years ago, was just helped me to analyze things and understand things, is this: the granddaddy of all heresy or false teaching is dualism. And dualism basically says this: spirit is good, matter is evil. Therefore, soul is good, body is evil. And so all we could do is simply tolerate the body, but if only we could transcend the body. And so sometimes you have women, more likely women than men, although could be a man also, in marriage, who thinks of love as being purely spiritual and who resists intimacy with her husband and wants him to be an angel. Okay,
Right.
Angels do not give physical love. Okay, but humans are not angels. They never were. They never will be.
Of course, that leads to a very dangerous situation in marriage, where you have the man who wants to get to be physical with his wife, and I've heard a lot of this. It's an amazing phenomenon, But the woman in some way just has a detestment of that experience, and they shun their husband. And then, of course, what's the danger of that? The husband is left to try and figure out how to experience that.
Yeah. Now, from one point of view, one might say, well, maybe he is not sufficiently spiritual in his making love with his wife. But then again, maybe she's not sufficiently physical. There's sort of an adage, I'm sure you've heard it before, that women have to learn that love is physical. Men have to learn that love is spiritual. Okay, and so what is hoped is that after a few years of marriage, they've got it fine-tuned just right, so that he is not simply physical in his making love to his wife, and that she is not simply spiritual. Any couple who arrives at that perfect blending, they are fortunate indeed. They are blessed by God. Absolutely. But knowing the theory ahead of time is good. Knowing the theory, and the theory is, and the fact is, soul is good, body is good, spirit is good, matter is good. Mm-hmm. Because as a matter of fact, our ultimate destiny as human beings is not to be disembodied spirits, contrary to popular religion, which is not always true religion. Our ultimate destiny is not to be angels. No human being is ever going to be an angel. I am not going to be an angel. If all goes according to plan, I plan to be a resurrected, glorified human being, and you as well.
Yeah, since I can't see two couples sitting around having a dualism discussion, as a means of just determining if they should have, if they have the ability to be married to each other. What are a couple practical things that two people could do to figure out, if fidelity and permanence are really capable there in each other, and if there is no dualism tendencies?
Mm-hmm. Well, patience in intimacy, in marital intimacy, should be a quality of a man. But patience goes beyond that. I would say that a woman would do well to look for a man who is patient generally in life, patient, who doesn't always demand that everything happen now, who's able to sit back and say, well, it will come when it will come, and not to demand results, immediate results. In fact, part of being a mature human being is waiting for results. It's sort of like the farmer. The farmer goes out, plows the field, then he plants the seed, and he does not go out the next day and pick the corn. There's a lot of days and things that need to happen before the corn is ripe, to be picked. So maybe women should marry farmers. Maybe husbands make good farmers, or farmers make good husbands, I should say. Yeah. But you see the point.
Yeah, and it is a good point, because in the end, there's a lot more to this. You can't walk around looking for impediments in another person, right? That could drive you crazy, first of all, and all the wonder, and it just is not healthy. And ultimately, marriage is a risk anyway. So you have to be really strong in yourself and what you're doing and what you're bringing into the marriage. And the other thing is, with capacity, is there is potential because of what love can draw out of another person in marriage. So you can't look for everything to be all set and nice and tidy in a row before you take the plunge, right? Because there's so much potential within the marriage for things to grow and blossom from there.
Yeah. The wife who wants her husband to change should think to herself, well, maybe I should change. And of course, the same sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. The husband who wants his wife to change, who wants her to be a more receptive person, he has to be a more courteous person. I use the word courteous in particular because the word courteous and the word courtship are obviously related.
Right.
Both of them have to do with a gentleness, a gradualness.
Yes.
To be a courteous person is to be gentle, to be gradual. What a wife wants is a gentle and courteous husband, who is not just in this ballgame for himself, but who is in it for her, and who cannot be satisfied in intimacy unless she is also satisfied. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have. We do want to stress that it is selfishness that's a main enemy in marriage when we're making the choice of who we'll marry, and having a conversation, if not many conversations, about fidelity and the permanence is pretty wise to do before you ever set out to marry someone. So thank you again for covering that topic. Go to our website, www.roadtocana.com, and find more resources, and especially these programs. We ask you to share them with others for all the work there is to do in helping people in marriage to have better marriages. And remember, while you're on this road, to trust in God's plan for you and to keep Christ's peace with you always.
On the road.